Welcome to Comic Sans, the podcast about comics for those who are sans knowledge. I'm Yant, the comic half of this podcast.
And I'm Nat. And we are still in New York.
We are still
in New York, folks.
So please be wary of any construction sounds in the background. We're hoping none of them will come through.
But if they do, just take it as a complete sound design, audio drama sort of thing. Just think of us in hard hats, wearing luminescent vests as a crane soars above us.
You know that shot, that famous photo of the construction workers sitting on the I-beam floating?
Yes.
Yeah, imagine me and Nat. But Nat's hanging off the edge like Mufasa and Lion King.
Nice.
And I'm standing there and I go, long live the king. And I step on his fingers and he falls. That's it. Just imagine that all in one photo. No motion, no sound.
I have no words.
Nat, what have you been enjoying lately? Tell me.
I'm going to give you another thing that I watched on the plane to New York.
Oh, yeah, what was it?
Planet Earth.
Okay.
I've been enjoying Planet Earth. David Attenborough, firstly, what a guy. Very old.
How old is he? How old is David Attenborough?
In his 90s, dude.
No way.
I'm pretty sure he's in his 90s. Someone fact check me on this. Roshan? He's 97,
He's
dude.
97
and
years
he's still
old?
standing there and telling us we gotta save the earth.
Wow. That's
It's
amazing.
crazy.
That's amazing.
So, really, what a guy.
He's telling us to save an earth that he's not going to be part of for much longer.
That's why what he says means so much more.
That's pretty honorable.
Because he has no stake in it. But yeah, I watch a lot of nature documentaries, and still, some of the things that I saw in those episodes, I'd never seen before. So I love nature.
Okay. You going to ask me? Are you going to be polite and engage in
Oh,
this
am I
conversation
supposed to?
backwards? Yes, you stupid.
Okay, sure, yeah. What are you enjoying? Not that I care.
I don't want to talk about it anymore. Let's just get into the freaking Yant. I don't want to talk to this guy. Just get this over with.
No, the people want to know.
I've been watching Dungeon Meshi on Netflix.
Dungeon Meshi?
Yeah. Delicious in Dungeon or Dungeon Meshi. That's what I've been enjoying.
I see.
And it's this ridiculous anime based off of a manga about these dungeon raiders. So it's like very fantasy oriented. But the big thing about it is that they're cooking what they find.
Now, when you say cooking, do you mean like the way that we use, like, oh, they're cooking?
No, as in they are boiling, they are frying.
Or like culinary
They
cooking.
are doing culinary. And,
Okay.
and a lot of the recipes like don't exist because they're cooking things that don't exist. But they can be like approximated to normal foods.
And this is an anime.
This is an anime.
It sounds pretty cool.
It's pretty cool, man. It's pretty cool.
Was
I would
it-
highly recommend it. It's very comfortable watching.
Was it a manga first?
It was a manga first.
Interesting.
Which is actually interesting that you'd bring up manga, Nat. What do you know?
Nani?
Oh.
Hey. Do you like that?
Yeah, that was pretty good.
Thank you.
Masaka. Well, okay, Nat, what do you know about manga?
It's from Japan.
Okay.
Very, very closely related to anime.
Okay.
I know we read a manhwa and that's not manga.
No, it's not.
But, they're sort of related in
Okay.
some intercontinental way.
Yep. I think it would be intra-continental, but that's okay.
You're right. International way.
Okay, sure.
That's pretty much it.
Okay, well, we've brought up some of it before.
Yeah.
But I'm going to give you a refresher and I'm going to give the listener a refresher. So I've talked a little bit about how manga audiences are segmented. I've mentioned this before.
The isekai.
Incorrect.
Oh, no. The shonen.
Correct. Okay, but let me work our way.
Something else.
Shoujo.
Shoujo.
So shoujo is for young women.
Yes.
So that's stuff like Sailor Moon or Fruits Basket.
Mm-hmm.
There's seinen, which is for older boys.
Mm-hmm.
So stuff like Gantz and Berserk.
Yep. That sounds familiar.
Josei, which is for older women. So one of those is Loveless. And of course, what we're reading today, Nat, what you've already said, Shounen.
Yeah.
For young boys.
Young boys.
Now, we've talked about a little bit about it, but we haven't really talked about what it really is. And we haven't talked about my relationship with it.
Yeah.
Nor have we talked about what it really is. So let's start with the first thing, how I got to know Shounen.
Sure.
Okay. So for a few years of my teenage life, when I was in that demographic of young boy, all I did was
Which
read
is
Shounen.
what age?
I would say, I actually don't know what the specific numbers are for Shounen. I would say it's something like 10 to 16.
Okay.
Because I know seinen starts at like 17, 18.
Because we had a separate conversation for this
About
one
young
summer
adult.
about teenager versus young adults.
Yes.
So, but shonen is a little bit broader.
Yeah, I think Shounen, it goes a little wider. I mean, this is also just like the intended, like who it's supposed to hit first, but it's not at all limited to those people.
Right.
Right. And there is an interesting thing, and that's what part of what we're going to talk about today, is how Shounen has aged as well. But let's save that for later.
Yeah.
Okay?
Sure.
So when I was reading Shounen as a teenager, as a young teenager, I'd have like 30 tabs open.
I
Okay?
always have 30 tabs open. Like on a day-to-day basis?
I'm a zero tab guy. I don't have any tabs open.
Wow.
Yeah. I shut down my laptop and I start afresh every day.
You want me to clap for you or something?
Yeah, a little bit.
I can't. I'm holding the mic.
I'd have 30 tabs open, and each of those tabs would be a different manga. Right? This is back when the internet wasn't so good. Right? So each of those would be completely different series. And so I'd read a page of one, and then I'd hit next page, and while it loads, I'd go down the line of the other 29.
Wow.
And then I'd circle back around, and that new page would have loaded, and I'd be like, all right. And what I never stopped to think was that if I didn't have 30 open, perhaps they would have loaded faster to begin with. I mean, a lot more efficient if I just had 2. And I don't think that's how you're supposed to read manga.
I don't think so.
I don't think that's
either.
how you're supposed to do anything.
Yeah.
But in fact, actually, that's what made me stop completely. At
You're
some
like,
point.
I can't believe I have to read 30 at a time.
No, it was-
how can anyone do this?
Well, it was kind of akin to that, where I went to a new tab and I was like, wait, I'm pretty sure I've read this before. And I was like, I kept thinking about it. I was like, no, I don't think I've read this before, but I think I've read this exact same story. Like I've read this exact same beat in one of the other 29 manga I was reading at the time. And I was like, you know what? All of this shit's the same. I'm quitting. I'm out.
Yeah, okay.
And I think the thing that I missed at the time, right, was how those similar beats could be by design. That could be something to appreciate in terms of the how of it's being done, but all I cared about was the what. I just wanted to download these stories into my brain as quickly as possible, and it just, cost me a lot of joy, so I stopped. These related tropes, I was starting to think of them as imitation, as copying, and it was not generating new content for my little young mind.
As formulaic.
Yes, formulaic. But I still had a lot of fondness for them. There were some that I kept going with, so some you'll know. Naruto, One Piece, Death Note. But there's also others like...
There's a Death Note musical. Do you know this?
There's not a Death Note musical.
There is.
Is there really?
Yeah.
That's awesome. Let's turn this episode off and let's go watch that.
I think it's Japanese.
Okay, let's go watch that. Forget it.
Okay.
Forget it. What are we doing here? Why do you know that? Why did you know there's a Death Note
musical? Because when I was in Korea recently, they had brought it over to Korea, so it's also in Korean. So actually, I'm not sure if it started in Korea or Japan.
It probably started in Japan.
Probably Japan, but they were staging it in Korea as well.
So let's see if you know some of these other mangas I was reading.
Yeah.
I think some listeners are going to know these for sure. Shaman King.
I don't know that one.
Rave Master.
Nope.
The Gray Man.
Nope.
Katekyo Hitman Reborn.
Nope.
That's a mafia about babies.
Nope.
And of course, the one that I spent the most time with in video games, in movies, in anime, committing almost every character's full name to detail, including their sword and their second sword's name.
The swords have names?
Any listener who knows what I'm talking about is already going to know I'm talking about Bleach.
Oh, the stuff you put in your washing machine. I once bleached my hair. Actually, in the first season of Comic Sans, you would see, in our little reels that I have blonde hair. That's bleach.
That's so interesting.
I'm just sharing with you because I'm anticipating you're going to say, Nat, what do you know about bleach?
Actually, I don't. That's not in my notes today.
And that would have been my answer to you.
Nope. No, we're gonna go backwards a little bit. We're gonna talk about the shonen itself, and we're gonna talk about how audiences receive the shonen.
Sure.
So we're not gonna talk about how you bleached your hair anymore.
Oh man,
you got one mention of it, and you're done.
I'm glad I did.
So a lot of shonen comes through Shonen Jump, which is a monthly magazine, an anthology of different manga series. It's where most of the books I mentioned come from. But there's also Kodansha, which is a different publisher, which has its own shonens. But we're talking about Shonen Jump today. It's this giant, pulpy magazine on cheap paper that's almost like the experience I was creating for myself online, except the chapters were in order. But like you get an issue of Shonen Jump, and it's like 20 chapters of different mangas at whatever space of the journey they are at currently.
Each manga one chapter.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So that's one way that people are reading shonens. But if Shonen Jump is showing all of its mangas in its pages, how are we supposed to know which manga is doing better than the others? How are we supposed to determine individual success?
Exactly. How, Yen? Tell me. How?
Tell me, Yen. How? Nat, I've got one word for you. Nat, I've got one word for you.
Nut.
Tankobans.
Oh, I've heard this. Why have I heard this before?
Good memory, Nat. Because Scott Pilgrim was published in something approximating the Tankoban form.
Yes.
In order for Brian Lee O'Malley to just, continue his love letter to manga that Scott Pilgrim already was.
So Tankoban is that little form factor. Is that it?
Yeah, so it's a couple chapters of a manga together, 6 to 7, 6 to 9, or whatever. And they release them as a little arc in that bundle. And then that little sort of book that's of a certain shape and size. The specifications are very, very similar.
And they read right to left.
Yes. They're like trades,
Yeah.
right? So you already know what a trade is. Tell the listener what a trade is.
Well, trade is when goods and services are exchanged across borders, typically.
Okay, now tell them what the GST is.
GST is the goods and service tax that was recently raised to 9% in Singapore as of January 2024.
Okay, tell the listener what taxes are.
So I bleached my hair.
Man, this sucks.
Trades. Trades are collections of issues.
Yes.
Compiled into one.
And so tankobans...
Of floppies. Floppies combined into chubbies.
No. That I do not accept. Tankoban sales are what drive a series' popularity. That's how we know how well a book is doing based off its Tankoban sales.
Okay.
Because Shonen Jump doesn't tell you anything. So a simplified way of looking at it is if you're a mangaka is the term we use to describe a person making manga.
Okay.
Which is usually they are both the writer and artist, though they may have a team of assistants.
Okay.
Sometimes the duties are split. But in this case of what we're reading today, we're talking about a mangaka, a singular person. If you're a mangaka making shonen, you put out your great chapters in Shonen Jump. You make sure your chapter-to-chapter story is amazing when it comes out in Shonen Jump. You drive up excitement, and you get people to go buy your tankobans. And then if you're lucky, you get to keep going.
And can I clarify, based on what you just said, it sounds like the tankobans continue where the Shonen Jumps left off? Or,
No.
Or it
so you can
repeats?
read, if you read every Shonen Jump, you can get through every tankoban.
So whatever started in Shonen Jump will be finished in Shonen Jump?
Yes. They continue together, and then but people collect those chapters in the tankobans.
I see.
Okay. And so you're bringing up this thing about continuing. Okay. 30% of shonens in Shonen Jump don't make it to the next year after they premiere. 30%. We don't know what the numbers are for the second year, but it is a very high rate of falling off.
Right.
It's a pretty merciless market. So it's not just about keeping readers, it's about getting them invested at all, right? You have to get them to read and want to get involved, and you want them to stay on the ride. How are you going to do that?
Marketing.
Kind of. There's a few different ways.
Yeah.
Right. So there's genre. You can do a shotgun approach and hope something sticks.
What's a shotgun approach?
So what I mean is you give them horror, action, romance, comedy, all of that in your first chapter, just making sure your appeal is as broad as possible.
Covering all your bases.
Right. And hopefully that's going to get enough people interested.
Right.
Striking character designs. You give people something to look at. Characters that look flashy, a world readers want to get invested in. So that's also a premise, an exciting premise that you can deliver in a first. So, we kind of talked a little bit about this with first issues and how first issues have to nab you in, right? And the hook. But imagine that your whole thing is the hook. Your whole first chapter is your hook.
Right. Kind of like a pilot of a TV show.
Sure. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And the last thing is familiarity. You give the reader something they already know. But you show them you're doing it a little different. You're playing to what's already worked because financially that makes sense if you want to keep going. And narratively, you already have some ideas of where you can go. So what's familiar in the shonen? What's something that's familiar in the shonen? There's the battle manga, which is a story about a young hero fighting enemies and growing in power. Very often those enemies become friends. New threats arrive. Characters grow in strength, things like that. There's the latent power in a chirpy protagonist, right? Often chirpy despite dour circumstances. So, for example, in Naruto, he's an orphan. He should be very sad, but he's very gung-ho and he's very excited. And he's got this incredible power locked inside him.
Right.
Monsters, question mark. I won't say more about that. A strange friend that alludes to a grander world outside of the initial chapter. And now in my notes, I've got this. Action.
What?
Lots of action, You give the reader
this
something.
is a separate point.
Yeah, separate.
I thought it was a strange friend point.
No.
The strange friend was getting some action.
No. And then there's the hook. Right, I already talked about this a little bit. How can we forget the hook net? I have that written down. How can we forget the hook net? People need to keep reading if you want to keep going.
Yeah. As with any medium, essentially.
And what better way to think about the hook than the first chapter? And what better way, you ready for this? To understand how the genre has evolved by reading 2 first chapters decades apart.
How can there be 2 first chapters?
Yeah, man. I'm having you read 2 completely different shonens today.
I'm reading 2.
You're reading the first chapter of 2 separate shonens today.
Interesting.
You're going to read the first chapter of Bleach by Tite Kubo.
Bleach?
That was my childhood favorite. And the first chapter of Jujutsu Kaisen by Gege Akutami. Jujutsu Kaisen is my current favorite. Bleach was my childhood favorite. Well, my current favorite is really One Piece, but let's not talk about One Piece, dude. That's going to be an 8-hour episode.
How are you feeling about the live action?
I haven't watched it.
Is it out already?
Yeah, it's been out for a while.
Okay. And you choosing not to watch it out of like defiance or out of fear?
I just don't care.
Oh, well, that's boring.
Sorry, I don't have a hot take for you. The first chapter of Bleach came out in 2001. Mm-hmm. The first chapter of Jujutsu Kaisen came out in 2018.
Generations apart.
Like 17 years.
Wow.
For Gege Akutami to have understood the landscape and see how it shifted. And an important thing to think about too is that neither of these first chapters are the first time either of these mangakas are doing a first chapter.
Right. They've written other things.
So for Kubo, he entered the scene with Zombie Powder, which ran 27 issues before getting cancelled.
He got cancelled?
No, his book got cancelled.
Oh.
The same way that all these Shonen Jump, it just didn't get continued.
Right.
And Jujutsu Kaisen is actually a sequel to a singular tankoban story called Tokyo Metropolitan Curse Technical School.
Say that again.
Tokyo Metropolitan Curse Technical School.
Okay.
Both of them, in some sense, are them trying again with a different first chapter.
Right.
And they want to make it stick this time.
Don't we all?
We always want to make it stick.
Unless you're making like noodles,
bread,
then you don't want it to stick.
You don't want it to stick.
No.
But you're making glue, you want that to stick.
Oh, yeah. Call me a gluka.
Like a mangaka, but you make glue?
Yeah.
I'm so depressed. I want to just point out, right? We're reading the first chapters here. Mm-hmm. Okay? So we're not talking about what many think of as Bleach's creative downfall, as it continues and perhaps goes on past the point when it should have stopped. We're not thinking about that.
That's the perennial problem.
That's something else. And we're not thinking about Jujutsu Kaisen's tonal shifts as the series develops.
Okay.
We're just looking at these first chapters.
The inception.
We're like little boys in a candy store with their first copy of Shonen Jump, eager to see what worlds we can get pulled into.
Okay. I guess what I'm really going to discover for myself is, will it stick?
That's true. You know that whole story I had about me quitting Shonen?
Yeah. Because you had 30 tabs open.
Yeah. Because I had 30 tabs open. It's because I took deja vu, that feeling of deja vu, to be a sign of failure on the mangaka's part. Instead of an invitation to look deeper. Right? Sure, some of the shonens I was reading weren't all that good. Not all of them were great. But I didn't have any sense of what was good and why it was good. I was just reading to read.
Yeah.
That's why you're so lucky to have me, Nat.
I'm so lucky.
You're so blessed.
Wow.
So when you're reading these first chapters, Nat, these two first chapters, if you get that deja vu, think about what I've been saying about the shonen publishing landscape, about familiarity, about audience retention. Think about the leapfrogging that Jujutsu Kaisen got to do because Bleach had already laid itself down on the tracks. Nat, this is very exciting to me. I've been excited to share floppies with you.
Okay.
But today I'm sharing 2 tankobans with you from Chicago Public Library System.
Woohoo!
Brought across state lines. I actually don't know if I'm allowed to do that. I don't think there's any rules about what you do with the library.
If you're a staff at the Chicago Public Library and you just heard that, close one eye.
And your ears.
Close one ear. But keep both eyes open.
So, listener, if you'd like to read along with Nat, you can read the first chapter of Bleach and the first chapter of Jujutsu Kaisen. You can get the tankobans if you like. I do believe that both of those first chapters are free on the Shonen Jump website because they want to get people involved.
I'm about to get involved.
He's about to get involved.
Here we go. Nani?
Masaka. Welcome back to Comic Sans, listeners, and Nat. Nat, who has entered the room with a real grumpy look on his face, folks. I think we've got a stinker on our hands.
Sometimes you pick things that I love.
But I think I want to be clear, though. Today's episode was not an intention to actually make you like it.
I know.
Right. Today is more of almost like I don't want to say like a literary experiment, but more of like a compare-contrast analysis.
Right.
So don't let your distaste or whether you enjoyed it or not affect our conversation. Let's think about what we actually just read.
And I want to say I recognize that manga is a big part of the comic sphere.
Right.
We have had many fans, particularly one, Farheen, who has been demanding that we read some manga. And so, I recognize that we need to get to this.
No, and I also want to, this is not going to be the last time we're doing it either. But today we are not even talking about manga specifically. We're talking about shonen.
Yes.
Okay, so now I want you to do, I always make you do your 5 words to recap. But this time, your 5 words have to apply to both. So every word you pick has to apply to both Bleach and Jujutsu Kaisen, which I think is actually going to be very easy.
Yeah. Let's start with... They're all going to be phrases.
Okay.
They're all going to be phrases, okay? We're going to go with, you can see it too.
Okay. That's a good first pick. I'm actually on board. Okay, second pick.
You see why it had to be a phrase?
Yeah.
Second one would be, people I love are in trouble.
Okay, good.
Third one is going to be, a sudden increase in power.
Okay.
And the fourth one is going to be, there's no way they're going to defeat that monster.
Great. One more.
And the last one will be, and my journey begins.
Terrific. Well done, Nat.
I think I nailed that assignment.
You actually did a great job on that one because those 5 pretty much sum up the entirety of both the first chapters of Bleach and Jujutsu Kaisen. Right. So let's get into this. Okay, so Bleach is about the lead character, Ichigo.
Question.
Yes.
Why is it called Bleach? Is that a translation thing?
There's some debate on it, but it actually relates to something that I already don't like bringing up because it's going to make you feel great, which is some of the speculation is that his hair is orange because it was bleach.
Now I'm invested. Now I have a personal stake.
But I don't think people know whether there's been a clearer reason than that. Yeah. So Bleach with the character Ichigo and Jujutsu Kaisen with the character Itadori. Both high schoolers.
Yep.
Both grumpy, smiley guys somehow. Ichigo's a little grumpier than Itadori. Itadori is very chirpy. Sort of strange family situations.
Yep.
Both first chapters introduce a different character who is from this strange world.
Yes, from that realm.
Who are hunting for something, and their hunt leads them to our 2 protagonists, Ichigo and Itadori. And then from there, strange things unfold and affect both those characters' loved ones and their safety. And then Ichigo and Itadori have to go save the day.
Yes.
By unlocking some strange spiritual power in them that they didn't even know they had.
Yes.
And
I'm going to say already, by virtue of the fact that I read that back to back, which is basically what you did as a young boy, I'm definitely going to get the stories mixed up. Like, I already forgot what plot point is from what manga.
So let's think about the things that both of them are doing and how they may be a little different.
Sure.
Okay, let's talk about genre. I brought up genre in the Yant. Right? Do you see what I mean by the shotgun approach? By bringing together a bunch of different genres together in this first chapter to just see what's going to stick to the wall. Right? Because the reason I bring that up, right, is because one of the things that I feel like ages poorly with Bleach is the whole family thing. Everything about Ichigo's family never matters again.
I see.
So there's that stretch of like 6 pages or so of this odd comedic bit where he's fighting with his dad and the 2 daughters in the background.
Yeah.
And you're kind of like, what is this? Where is this going?
Right.
Doesn't really have much to do with the rest of the story. Even within the first chapter already sticks out like a sore thumb.
Is it sort of checking the box of like family comedy?
I would say, I mean, there's a narrative reason, which is to try and get us invested in the sisters so that we care as much as Ichigo does when they're hurt. But I do think it is an element of, okay, I'm intending to hit raw entertainment value. And one of those raw entertainment values is comedy. So I'm going to tick that box.
Right.
I would say Jujutsu Kaisen has less of that.
Yeah, for sure.
There's still some comic bits. There's still some comedic bits in it. But it doesn't feel like it detracts from the story that much.
Yeah.
Right? It kind of feels, and this is my thesis today.
Sure. Your TED Talk. Welcome to Yen's TED Talk.
Is that Jujutsu Kaisen, and this is not to discount what Bleach was doing, because Bleach is an extremely influential manga, and Jujutsu Kaisen wouldn't exist without Bleach.
Yeah, for sure.
But like I said in the end, I think Gege was able to do things in Jujutsu Kaisen because Bleach had done it before, and he could just zoom past that. Right? He could just race past it, and he could streamline it, and he could make it really focused, and boom, get you somewhere else.
Bleach walked, so Jujutsu Kaisen could run.
Yes. Or as I said in my Yant, Jujutsu Kaisen
laid down
something
like that.
Who gives a So something I kept talking about was the hook.
Yeah.
Right? What's the hook for Bleach?
Is it the whole thing about him being different from the rest?
Right? Yeah.
Like, he's better than his family already. The sisters can see ghosts. He can see them the clearest. And then he can, like, there's a line that the sister says where he does all 4, right? He summons, he sees, he what does he? I don't know what else he does.
Yeah.
Like he has a very holistic sense of that realm, but then also like the Soul Reaper that he meets is like, you are different.
Yes.
Because you can see me firstly, and then you can do a bunch of other things that you should not be. He broke the binding spell
That he shouldn't be able to do.
Yeah,
things
yeah.
like
Is that
right?
the hook? Sort of this. What's the word?
Special.
Special. Yes.
Right, he's special. I do think that is part of the hook, but to be more specific, right, let's go to the last page.
Sure.
Right? So earlier we're introduced to Ichigo and we're told his name is Ichigo, Strawberry Kurosaki, we're given his age, 50. So it's kind of like a bio panel,
Yeah.
right? Do you remember this? And then it says high
It
school.
happens multiple times.
It happens
throughout,
multiple times, right? But then at the end, he becomes high school student / Soul Reaper.
Yeah.
And so that's initially the hook of Bleach. And those are the last words of the first chapter, right? And so you're thinking, oh, okay, so now this book is about how's he going to juggle between those two things? How's he going to be both a high schooler and a Soul Reaper, right? I'll say that that's not what makes Bleach interesting.
Okay.
That drops off pretty fast. So eventually a bunch of his friends get imbued with the same spiritual powers as he does and Soul Reapers, but the manga quickly jettisons that and sends them to a completely different world, the world where Rukia is from.
All of them go together to Rukia's world.
And so high school is not in the picture anymore.
Right. They drop out.
Kind of.
Essentially.
It doesn't matter where they are, right? But what's the hook for the Jujutsu Kaisen? Thinking about how the first chapter ends.
Well, I mean, he eats the finger.
He eats the finger and then what happens?
And then he becomes this demon.
Yes.
Ish. But then he manages to control the demon. Again, going back to he's special. It's a 1 in a million chance that this happens, right? And then I guess it becomes this more internal dual identity.
So sorry, I realize we may not have explained what the finger is. Right?
Yeah.
So Fushiguro, who is the equivalent of Rukia in Bleach, somebody part of this special world comes here and he's looking for this demon finger, which it turns out the
occult club.
The occult club, which Itadori, our protagonist, is a member of,
Yeah.
is actually going to unwrap. And that ends up summoning the demons. And in an attempt to stop the demons, Itadori eats the finger.
Right.
Which then leads Fushiguro to say the thing you were just saying, 1 in a million chance, he's going to survive, he's going to do it, blah, 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 right? And I think that, for me as a hook, is so much more engaging. And part of that, I think, the hook of him fighting this internal demon that's inside him, right? And I think part of the reason Gege even goes there is because he already knows. This high school thing, not that interesting.
And interestingly, again, running on this thesis that you have,
Yeah.
the so-called loved ones that are in trouble in Jujutsu Kaisen are these random club members who he kind of just met. And it's sort of like, if I use your thesis, the writer is like, well, actually in Bleach, no one cared about the family. Like they made all this effort to set up the stakes of the family, but actually it doesn't matter. As long as there's someone to save, the point still goes across.
I think you're absolutely right because those students never show up again in Jujutsu Kaisen and you do not mind. Right? You never feel like there's this lingering plot thread that you're like, oh man, I wish I knew what happened to those guys. It doesn't matter. The book's not about that.
Yeah.
Right? Well, transparently pretty much making them objects for the hero to engage with and then leave it. Right? Because we already know the reader's not going to care that much about this thing. And again, Jujutsu leapfrogging over somewhere else.
Yeah.
And I think those last few pages of Jujutsu Kaisen, let's break them down. Okay? After he eats the finger. So there's this big, multi-panel pages, a lot of deliberating about what they should do next. Fushiguro is saying, get out of here, Itadori, just get the hell out of here. And Itadori's like, oh, wait, the only way I can hurt this thing is if I eat this finger. And Fushigoro's like, no, not really. And then Itadori eats the finger.
He's a madman.
And we go to this silence. We go to this 1 in a million thing that Nat was just talking about. The monster's rushing Itadori. And then we get almost the equivalent of a splash page. It's a 2-page spread. And Itadori is swiping his hand and the entire monster gets blown into bits.
Yeah.
And it's just a very shocking page turn because of the density of the panels on the previous page. And the amount of white space here also, right? But then on the left side of the page is a lot of darkness because they've colored Itadori's evil laugh now that he's possessed by this demon with black.
Nani?
Osaka. And then now there's this big turn on Itadori and he's looking at the city of Tokyo and he's like, finally, I'm free again.
And this is the demon speaking.
This is the demon speaking.
Right.
And he says, it'll be a massacre, right?
Yeah.
The city looks tiny before him. And the next page turn, he's choking himself.
Yeah, that was a pretty funny moment. Like, what's going on?
And then it turns out, Itadori's actually awake in there. And the demon is talking to Itadori. And I love this page.
Two-Face moment.
The Two-Face moment,
Yeah.
right? Why don't you describe it now?
Sure. So we have two panels side by side. Actually, with the first panel, Itadori is looking to the right, and then in the next panel is looking to the left. So they're looking at each other essentially. And then the first panel, it's Itadori saying, "It is my body, you know."
You're doing it in the reverse order.
Oh shit. I'm not gonna cut that because I'm gonna be very open and say for the first 10 minutes, I kept rereading the first few pages of Bleach because I didn't understand what was going on. I was like, this has no narrative sense.
No. And then I realized, don't lie. What happened?
And then I realized I was reading the pages right to left, but I was reading the panels left to right.
No, I'm choosing to believe you were like a goldfish and you were turning the page and you were like, okay, right to left. And then you forgot what you were doing and then you went back left to right and you're like, wait a minute.
No, yeah, so I remembered the pages turned right to left, but I forgot about the panels. So I got really confused because I was reading everything left to right in the panels and I was like, wow, am I just dumb? Like, this is for young boys? But yes, let me correct myself. So two panels side by side. The first one is looking to the left, and then it's the demon talking, saying, "How are you able to move?" And the font is different as well, which is quite
different
nice.
lettering.
Yeah. And then on the next panel on the left is Itadori looking back at himself, essentially saying, "It is my body, you know." Yeah.
So it's a fun little, perspective switch to get us. And I think that's kind of astounding how clearly you got that Itadori's still in there.
Yeah.
Right? The book doesn't really do much hand-holding to be like, oh, this demon is now in control. It just instantly jumps to the demon's in control.
Strangling himself.
Yeah. This point about left to right is an interesting point that I don't really know what to make of because it does affect how you read, right? And not just reading the words, but we talked about how you read the page and how an artist can use the slanted lines to guide you through. And that's why reading manga in translation is always interesting because you're actually reading left to right and then you're defying your eye order and you're then sliding left.
Because the English words still read left to right.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. But also it's a matter of controversy because you think, oh, well, you could just switch it. Just mirror the whole thing. But then that's not really how the artist intended it. Do you know the film Akira?
No.
Okay. So the film Akira was also collected as a manga. Very famously, the movie and the manga were made by the same guy.
Okay.
He wasn't like the solo person doing it, but he was like one of the rare
instances. He led
instances.
the project.
It was the rare instance where the mangaka was also the director.
Yeah.
And there's a translated version of it, and they flipped it. And I've talked to people about how I've read that, and they're like, oh, you read the flipped one? And I'm not quite sure what to make of that, because I do see where they're coming from, but I also do think there's something about the way the eye naturally slides. And the Japanese mangaka is writing and drawing for the eye sliding right to left, fully.
And for a language that reads right to left.
And for a language that reads right to left.
More importantly.
Yeah. So I'm torn about it.
Yeah.
I'm torn about the flipping. So we just talked about when Itadori gets powered up.
Yep.
Let's talk about the moment when Ichigo gets powered up.
When Bleach gets powered up. Does he ever go by Bleach in the
He never goes. That's part of the reason why people are like, why is it called Bleach? Because the word bleach never comes up. Nobody. Okay, this just in, folks. This just in. Word from our producer on why it's called Bleach. So Kubo wanted to initially call it Black.
Okay.
Because all the characters were wearing black. Then they realized it was too obvious. And maybe not in 2001, this wasn't a concern, but I would say this. It would not have been Googleable.
Sure.
And so they changed it to white. And then white was, hold on, I'm calling my producer again. What did my producer say? Sorry, this is just in again, folks. It's just in. I'm continuing from my previous interruption for a producer. That he didn't call it white. Should I redo this whole thing? Would that make it easier for you?
It's okay, just go.
He didn't call it white because he also felt that was too obvious. But he liked Bleach because it had the connotations of both black and white, but was something else.
Okay.
So it's not actually anything to do with your hair, Nat. I'm sorry.
Oh, well, I'll choose to believe it. What were you getting to? Yes.
I want to get to the moment where Ichigo gets powered up.
His powers, right?
Yeah. So Ichigo gets it by, Rukia says, I have to stab you in the heart.
Yeah.
And so it's again the same moment of like, oh, the hero has to make a sacrifice or sort of a bold decision in order to unlock this ability.
Would you rather eat a finger or get stabbed in the heart?
Oh, that's a great question, Nat. That's a great question. I've been dying for someone to ask me this. Every day I'm walking in the street and I'm hoping a New York influencer will come up to me and be like, sir, for $5, $5. Would you eat a finger?
Sir, are you a rapper? Are you a rapper?
Hey, so what are you listening to? Oh, I'm listening to Comic Sans episode 6.
Hey, so what do you do for a living?
How much do you pay rent? Anyway.
And also, would you rather eat a finger?
Or would you rather eat a finger or get stabbed in the heart? I think I'd rather eat the finger.
You can just swallow it, right?
No, I take it back. I'd rather get stabbed in the heart because I know what happens. Like, getting stabbed in the heart ends up being fine for Ichigo.
Right.
Eating the finger has
you don't
some
want
consequences.
You don't want the
for Itadori.
demon just chilling in you.
No, I don't really want the demon chilling in me. It's also, there's also like the way the demon is depicted as chilling in Itadori is in like this giant cavern with skulls and he's sitting on this throne. I don't want that inside me.
Can I just segue very quickly? At the start of Jujutsu Kaisen, did you read this page?
Is that the author's
it's
blurb?
author's note? And he says, the other day I saw a video of myself laughing hysterically. I was a little taken aback by how demonic I looked. ... I hope you enjoy that type of person's first graphic novel. Which I think is really interesting because you talked about the laughing, the ha 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 ha.
Yeah.
It was inspired by a video of him laughing, which is pretty wild. Anyway, back to
Ichigo getting stabbed in the heart. Wait, would you rather get stabbed in the heart or eat a finger?
Well, I mean, the consequence aside, like
Consequence
assuming that the power, the effect is the same, I'd rather eat the finger because you could just swallow it. And I eat a lot of weird things anyway. Like I don't do good with pain and blood.
Sure, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, sorry. My producer's calling. We are sheathing the sword. Okay, we're putting the sword away. You're fine, man. We had plans for an extra special episode, but we hear you and we're getting the fingers out. Okay, I get it. We're getting the fingers out.
For a second, I thought sheathing the sword was a euphemism for something.
No.
And I was like, what's happening right now? Am I being hazed?
Let's talk about Ichigo.
Sure.
Okay, so we've got this left side page and all this ba-bum, 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 dum, 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 ba-bum, ba-bum, ba-bum. We're getting the heartbeat of Ichigo.
I can be honest.
Yeah.
I don't like those things.
Really?
I
Why?
find them
Say
very
more.
distracting.
Okay.
Like, and it's across both, right? There's the sound effects that are really just all over. I mean, it's interesting because we waxed lyrical about the sound effects in this one summer.
Yeah.
And how tasteful they were.
Yeah.
And how poetic they were. But this one just, a lot of it is overwhelming. Like, especially what we're looking at right now, which is that sort of, it's just the words repeated over and over and over again. And it's just everywhere and it fills the page and it happens a lot in Jujutsu as well.
That's an interesting point that you've brought up because this is another thing about translation.
Right?
Because these wouldn't actually be in English.
These are onomatopoeias in English.
Yes.
Yeah.
These are things that they're translated. And I do think, I don't speak Japanese, I don't read Japanese, but I do think the shape of them on the page, Kubo makes the page such that the sound effects make sense on it.
Right. Because Japanese is a character-based language,
Yes.
it's way more pictorial.
Yes. So you are angular, you are round, there's shape to it, there's color to it, there's texture to it in a way that English is unable to do.
That's an interesting point.
So yeah, like you're saying, Japanese is a pictorial language, and that means that the writer can manipulate those words such that they can suit the page better, right? So that they mirror the panel lines, perhaps. If the character is grabbing for someone, it is following the lines of that. They're almost like motion lines.
Right.
And what's worth noting is that not every translator chooses to do that.
Right.
Because they see that, the sound effects is also an act of creation by the writer, by the mangaka, and that is not something we're comfortable or we feel like would be able to recreate in English.
So they leave the Japanese characters in?
They leave the Japanese characters in, and then underneath they'll have an asterisk with saying what would that sound like.
Right.
So I think the Dark Horse translation of Berserk does that. Right? It never tries to translate those effects.
So what I'm learning is English sucks?
I do think there's severe limitations to translation, and I think these are things worth thinking about when we're reading these things, right? So anyway, back to dum 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 dum. Very dramatic, heavy blacks and whites.
Yeah. Straight through the heart, and you're too late.
Yep, that's where the sword goes. Straight through Ichigo's heart, and lots of blacks, and then we go to the next page, and we're hit with this blaring white.
And a big boom.
Boom. Ba-om. Ichigo actually disappears.
Into the flash
of light.
Yeah.
We only see the monster. We see the monster reaching for him. We see the monster almost get to him, and then we narrow into the monster's eyes, and then suddenly, classic anime thing, I'm sure you know this moment. The guy sheaths his sword and is on the other side You know what I'm talking about?
I have no idea what you're talking
The
about.
two guys are facing off, and when they've got the swords and they rush each other.
Oh, yes,
and then they
yes.
disappear and they appear on the other sides of each other. And then when the other one sheets his sword in, the other one spurts in the blood.
Oh, yes.
That's what's happening
Oh,
here.
I didn't get that. It was really hard for me to understand what was happening in this particular panel. Like, am I reading it right that Rukia says that the sword changes according to the person's power?
Yes.
So this is a massive sword because Ichiro is just so damn powerful.
It depends. The shape of the sword and the type of sword suits the person's like power, but it doesn't necessarily mean a bigger sword is better.
Right. Hey, size doesn't matter, huh?
It's the
thought that counts.
Yeah, it's the thought that counts. That's exactly what I was going to say. Yeah, and it's just, I mean, you know, I don't want this to be an episode where I'm just ragging on Bleach.
Right.
But let's look at this panel over here.
But I mean, you know, we all hope that over time, art improves.
Yeah.
We stand on the shoulders of art makers before us.
Exactly.
Right? And so saying that something is better 17, 18 years later doesn't mean that what came before is trash.
Of course.
Yeah.
Wow, couldn't have said it better myself.
Thank you.
So there's this last page, the last panel there.
Yeah.
Do you see this impact font? Not centered.
I mean, that sort of white text on black font happens quite a bit throughout the manga.
But it's just so, like, it's a different font than the rest of the book.
Yeah.
It lends it this kind of strange voice.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, it goes back to an idea we brought up before, which is growing in public.
Yeah.
With the webtoon, right? That a creator is putting their thing out raw, or not raw, maybe refined, but growing as time goes on,
Yeah.
right?
I mean, that's us in this podcast. We would hope we're getting better, but if you
I
listen to the
don't-
first
I wouldn't
season,
say that. I wouldn't say that.
you know,
man.
that we were rough around the edges.
Oh no, I'm saying we're worse now.
Oh.
I'm not saying we were great then. No, I'm saying we're declining. I'm gonna read you the note at the start. So we read.
I read this as well.
Okay,
But yeah, sure.
This is from Kubo. Hello there. You are now holding the very first volume of Bleach. I worked really hard writing it. Please treat it kindly. Sincerely, Tite Kubo.
Do you feel bad now?
I do feel a little
You
bad.
feel bad now?
No,
He
but I
worked
also
very
but I
hard.
also love Bleach, and you know he worked very hard on it. And I think that's part of like loving a thing is also knowing where it could be better.
Right.
I would like to hit you with this really strange bit of Bleach trivia.
I'm ready.
Okay,
Hit
so
me.
in those first pages, there's a bunch of skateboarders, and they disrupt a shrine,
Yeah.
right? Let's look at them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you can tell that Kubo is racializing them in a very particular way.
Yes.
He's given them afros. He's
Yes.
given them, larger lips.
Yes.
It's not a very flattering characterization.
Yes.
So I mentioned earlier that Ichigo has classmates that get powers.
Yeah.
One of them is Chad. Chad is of Japanese and Mexican descent.
Okay.
And as he starts in the series, he starts out pretty dark.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think it's a caricature in the way these characters are. I think Kubo doesn't make that mistake again.
Yeah.
He actually has a lot of great people of color characters within the rest of the book. And I say people of color in the Japanese context,
Right.
where, Japanese is not a person of color because they are the Japanese person.
So white people are people of color in the Japanese context.
No. Oh boy, am I putting my foot in it. There are plenty of characters coded as white in Bleach.
Right.
Anyway, Chad, as the series goes on, grows lighter and lighter.
Oh dear.
Becomes fairer and fairer.
He was running out of ink?
That is actually the argument that Shonen Jump used.
What?
They said it became more expensive because we're talking about the Tankoban, right? Talking about the Shonen. It's printed on cheap pulp paper.
Right.
The whole thing is about how can we do this at mass as cheap as possible. One of those concessions is no color.
Right.
And one of those colors apparently is gray. So as time went on, Chad got lighter and lighter skinned so that the publication would become cheaper, quote unquote cheaper.
Oh man. This sucks.
That's not a fun fact. That's not a fun
Yeah.
fact. But what is a fun fact?
You really
is that,
framed it as like, hey, I have a fun piece of Bleach trivia for you. Racist.
But fun fact, Chad is also one of the best characters in Bleach.
Okay.
Love Chad.
We'll give
Love
Kubo
Chad.
that. We'll give Kubo that.
And it's one of those things that's a little complicated.
Yeah.
Because like I said, Bleach actually has pretty good representation of black characters. Way better than I'd say most other mangas do. Because most of them are just Japanese or white characters. Kubo goes the extra mile and tries to incorporate other cultures into it. And a big part of that, and you don't get a sense of it here, unfortunately, but Kubo's fashion sense is insane.
Right.
There's a parallel world where Kubo just went and became a fashion designer. And he takes a lot of influence, a lot of appreciation and love of African-American culture, black culture, and incorporates that into his fashion designs for those characters. In a very, I would say, as someone of not involved in this at all, I would say it's respectful and it's out of love. So it's complicated, right? Because there's, you've got Chad getting lighter and lighter, but then you also have Chad at all.
Right.
And of course, this is a very complicated discussion about, is there any obligation to do that? Right? They're writing about Japan, they're writing a Japanese story, blah, 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 blah. I'm not going to get my foot any deeper into this pool.
Let's move on.
Yeah. Nat, I'm not going to ask you if you're going to keep reading, because I already know your answer.
Yeah. Actually, one of the things that I haven't talked about yet, I talked about the sound effects and how I didn't love that. I think another reason why I probably wouldn't keep reading and why this one wasn't my cup of tea, so it's just also and again, I totally recognize this is probably primarily a translation issue, just the nature of the writing. Just very over the top, very sort of, everyone's shouting at each other. I think we've read a lot of very beautiful comics in recent times.
Yeah, a little more serene.
This one summer, I'm going back to like Gideon Falls, right? Which is, I would say, a very prosaic kind of quality to the writing. Very realistic dialogue. Yeah, so the nature of this dialogue, a lot of shouting. Especially in like Bleach, when Ichigo and his dad were shouting at each other.
Yeah.
And it's very over the top, sort of hitting each other. I'm just like, wow, this is a lot. It's a lot. Yeah, it's not my cup of tea.
I think that's translation. It's also the audience, right? You are out of the age group of what that audience would be.
Yeah, I'm old.
You're old.
I'm old, grumpy man.
You're out of the seinen range, even.
What is there for me?
Nothing. You're supposed to stop reading manga.
Newspapers.
Yeah, instead of reading, the newspaper pulp and shonen, you're just supposed to read the newspaper.
Garfield.
Don't bring up Garfield, man. What is going on? Don't bring up Garfield.
That's the classic newspaper comic.
No, Peanuts.
Oh, sure.
Gosh.
Okay, anyway, you were saying I'm out of the age range.
Yeah, so I'm not going to ask you but can you see why I brought these two together?
I can. I think it was a very, very thoughtful pairing. I think the similarities, the formulas you were speaking of could not have been any clearer.
Can you see where Gege was launching from Bleach?
Yeah, and I think you could see that sense of almost like, again, different writers, different comics, but it almost feels like an iteration.
Yes.
Like a second iteration of something, taking what worked well, taking what felt unnecessary and omitting those things.
And I think to make this about art making in general, I do think this is just such a direct instance of how young artists, before they're artists perhaps, are engaging with material they love and then thinking, how can I do this? And this is just such a clear instance of those things in parallel with one another, right? I mean, there's so many works I look back to that I loved when I was a kid, and I go back and I'm like, oh, this is what I've been trying to do with this thing. This project I've been working on now is me trying to recreate this thing I read when I was a kid, or the feeling I had when I was a kid. And I think that's just what's exciting about this for me.
Yeah.
It's not Gege, but the mangaka for Demon Slayer, I believe, has said that they came up with the characters for their manga, Demon Slayer, because in high school they would just doodle Bleach in the margins of their notes.
Right.
And they would make up their own swords and then make up their own characters, and then that became its own story.
Yeah.
And I think that's just so exciting.
I mean, as artists, we all steal. Nothing is original.
No, and I think it's, if anything, it's so exciting to see how Kubo has influenced decades of Japanese shonen manga.
It goes back kind of what you were saying last episode with the fan letters in Sex Criminals.
Yes.
Sort of like how people be like, oh, actually, here's a letter from Alan Moore when he was a kid, and then seeing how the inspirations manifests in their own work.
And I think this whole thing about, I talked about how 30% of shonens don't make it past the first year.
Yeah.
Part of that, I think the industry, it rewards familiarity, but to get to this point of experimentation and invention, you have to sort of go through the treads that other people have gone through before.
Right.
And then launch from there and develop your own thing in your second and your third year is nothing like anyone's ever seen before.
Right.
And that's what happens in Jujutsu Kaisen. It goes crazy. It goes crazy.
Completely departs from Bleach.
Completely departs from Bleach. Because it can. Right? Because it's suddenly, now it's got its credentials. It's got its audience. It managed to get that audience because of what it took from Bleach. And now it can go elsewhere. And that's just exciting too.
Yeah.
So now to the second question, Nat.
Which is still not a question.
It's not a question, but it is an equation. If you like X, you would like Jujutsu Kaisen and or Bleach.
Solve X.
Solve X.
Let me think for a second. This is going to be incredibly random, but as I was reading the mangas, the intensity of the words, the imagery, the action just brings to mind 30 Seconds to Mars.
That's pretty good. No, that's pretty good. I like that. I like that
Do you
a
know
lot.
like what I'm talking about? Like especially maybe not the current stuff. I don't listen to whatever current stuff they're putting out.
Thinking This Is War, Kings and Queens.
Yes,
absolutely.
Break me down, bury me.
I love what you're saying because a huge part of my childhood was watching AMVs, which is anime music videos.
Oh right, I've seen those.
And there's 100% a Bleach This Is War AMV. A Bleach Kings and Queens AMV.
War.
Wait, this just in from our producer. There is a 700,000 view AMV of Bleach for This Is War, and he's playing it off screen, and it's frozen on the word martyr. Which is it.
The Comic Sans fandom. Let's get that video to 1 million views.
Let's get it the Comic Sans bump.
Wow, I'm pretty surprised. I'm pleasantly surprised.
That was good.
Because that really was a totally cold association that I made. Just that was cool.
Good job, man.
Thank you.
Good job.
Thank you.
Now I'm loaded with AMV suddenly, and I can't think of anything.
Just recommend that video.
If you like the Bleach This Is War AMV, you'd love Bleach. No, but I should try and give an actual recommendation. Oh gosh, this is tough. You kind of just took the best one.
It's okay. I think we can actually move on.
Yeah, actually, let's move on. Let's forget it. Me. Okay, so now the question comes back to me in a different way.
Yeah.
Nat, give it to me.
Give it to me more. Give it more. Give it more.
Do you actually know what I'm asking you to do? Yeah. Are you having a stroke? What the hell's going on?
I'm very tired. So you've heard 30 Seconds to Mars. You've watched the AMV. You've read Bleach. What is next in the pipeline, Yen? What's the next comic?
Well, this is tough because I've kind of already built in a pipeline within this episode of Bleach to Jujutsu Kaisen.
Okay, then what's after Jujutsu Kaisen?
Well, that's the thing. I think people who like manga are going to be sitting at the edge of their seats hoping I'm going to say Chainsaw Man.
But you're not.
But I'm not going to say Chainsaw Man because I don't love Chainsaw Man.
Oh, dear. And that's another manga, I assume.
That's another manga that is also like an evolution of this form.
Here's my challenge to you. Can you recommend a comic that isn't a manga that would kind of branch out from this?
Oh, great question. And I actually have a very kind of a strange answer to that.
Sure.
Which is the Boom Power Rangers by Kyle Higgins. Mighty Morphin Power Rangers by Kyle Higgins.
Oh, it's actually Power Rangers.
It's actually Power Rangers.
It was a comic?
Well, it was, pretty much any property you can think of, Nat, has been a comic at some point. But this was a modern comic.
Teletubbies?
Probably.
Oh, wow.
I bet it's a Teletubbies Shounen. But no, well, because Kyle Higgins incorporated, I think, a lot of ideas from Shounen in terms of power levels, in terms of enemies, the battle manga tropes. Mm-hmm. The art in it is very kinetic, but it's not quite a manga. It's something else.
Okay.
It's one of those astounding adaptations. We talk about, sometimes there's some comics that are in circulation when you're like, oh, actually that property, usually you think the licensed property isn't very good. Mm-hmm. But Power Rangers is one of those, oh, it's really good. Planet of the Apes is really good. And Sonic the Hedgehog is really good.
30 Seconds to Mars to Sonic the Hedgehog pipeline right here, first and only time.
Honestly, Nat, you're not online enough to know, but you could probably just go straight from 30 Seconds to Mars to Sonic. There's no need for an in-between at all.
Can't wait for the This Is War AMV of Sonic.
Bro, there is almost definitely one for the anime Sonic X.
No. I want the new Sonic. I want the Knuckles movie that's coming out this year.
Well, everyone, this has been Comic Sans. We read Bleach and Jujutsu Kaisen. We hope you try it too. Also, we hope that you follow our podcast.
Yeah, follow our podcast wherever you get your podcast, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Pocket Casts, whatever floats your boat. That really helps us out a lot. Rate the show.
Share it with your friends.
Share it with your friends, your mother, your father, your cousins.
Your mangaka.
Your dog sitter.
Your mysterious friend who just floated through your window saying, I sense something here. Your Rukia. You already forgot.
No, I got it.
This has been Comic Sans, everyone. We'll see you on the next page.
See ya. Thanks for listening to Comic Sans. This is an Andas Productions podcast hosted by Myle Yant and Nathaniel Ma and produced by Roshan Singh Sambhi and Scott Lee Chua. Our cover art is by Isabel Fang. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to follow and rate Comic Sans. And while you're at it, follow us on social media at Comic Sans Pod. Links are in the description below.